Yep. That's
Oh,
and they spent what they had two 30-second commercials, I think. So they spent
Mm-hmm.
$14 million yesterday.
yeah, we need to get started because I didn't fell down the rabbit hole of my explore page on Instagram, and I might not get unstuck.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do it then. Let's get moving.
Right.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing we call life. On today's episode, our topic is going to be interracial relationships. And so, Brother Ray, why don't you go ahead and get us kicked off?
Um, I'll try to I'm gonna make this brief because I know we're gonna dive into this. Everybody that we know, other than I'm gonna say white supremacists, have interracial relationships. Um, I know the first thing that typically comes into people's minds is marriage or dating, but we all have interracial relationships. I know I shared with you guys in a previous season that I was bullied growing up. Well, one of the best people that I ever hung out with, or one of my friends at the time, actually was a white kid, and he always treated me fair, and we got along all the way through, I'm gonna say, high school until up until now. But and a couple of my friends that I actually consider to be like my brothers are actually white men. So I have interracial relationships with people of all different races. And I think that a lot of people really do get stuck on the dating aspect versus looking at we all have interracial
You
relationships.
know,
So
I think that um, from a dating perspective, I think that it's kind of ridiculous that we still in 2024 are, having this conversation. To be quite frank about it, like, you know, and I think about the fact that, as you all know, I don't know if all of our listeners do, but my wife is white, and so I think the fact that there's anybody out there who would judge me, who would judge my blackness, who would judge, what I stand for, would judge my character or any of those things, or anybody who's dating interracially or married interracially, is just ridiculous, right? I get that, and I won't go too far down a rabbit hole just yet either, because again, I know we have some things to unpack here, but I get that there are those out there, right, who are self-loathing, those who, men and women alike, right, who are in interracial relationships, who are self-loathing, who, have stereotypes about black men or black women, depending upon which way you're going with that, but which is also ridiculous to have stereotypes about an entire race or gender. um, is just it's ridiculous, right? That's kind of where sexism and racism and all of those things come into play. But my blackness is not so fragile, right, as to be damaged by who I'm dating or who I'm married to, right? My wife is the first white woman I've ever dated, and so she and I met at what, I was 41, 42 years old, whatever it was at the time. 40, I was 41 when we met. So that meant for 41 years prior to that, anyone that I'd actually dated or was married to, because I was married prior to my wife, my current wife, um, were all black. And so I'm not, I didn't all of a sudden become some different person because now I'm dating and now married to this white person. I'm still the same person. Nobody questioned my blackness. Nobody questioned anything about my activism or anything else before. None of those things changed. I didn't change as a person. Right. And so the fact that we still even have to have these conversations, I think it's just ridiculous. But again, we'll get more into it
About
again. I know
we focus on the dating aspect, and I know we're going to get into this. Where I think you can't have this conversation without talking about Loving versus Virginia, and you can't have this conversation without talking about Johann Blumenbach, and the invention of the 5 races in 1800, which has been countless times disproven as a scientific basis. It is a totally human, man-made invention. But, it's one of those things when you travel and you see different areas and people, because I think the original distinction that we would make is our village, our tribe, our nation. And the race part was not really, years ago, I was in Belize, man. And I mean, all of them, they were just from Belize. They were white, they were black. Some of them looked like they were, Latin descent. It was even Asian descent. And they all spoke Creole because they were from Belize. And it was a beautiful thing. So, yeah, just to agree with what everybody is saying, we're going to, I think we're really going to get into it. But, I have a feeling that we're going to really dig into the stigma of romantic dating and relationships like that. But again, bravo to Ray for opening it up, to all relationships and how we look at this. But, if we're going to be serious about it, we know that the heavy stigma is on those romantic relationships and marriages per se. So,
yeah, Ray did just jump into with regard to all types of relationships that involve people from different races. When I thought about this and when I think about this, I think about the divisiveness that is born out of people trying to relate who are of different races, ethnicities. And a lot of it goes back to the fact that, we were all, we talk about it all the time, we're all a product of our environments, upbringing, our experiences, so the more you have, the more open your mind becomes to understanding and respecting the differences. And so I would say for me, it's always been about the growth process, right? And I grew up in, in a community that had no people that looked different than I did, uh, for the early part of my life. But when I was exposed, guess what? There was some conflict, and the conflict wasn't, what people might think as far as, me not liking people that looked differently from me. It was really just a lack of understanding of some cultural differences and some needs that I had, as a young Black boy uh, going to a predominantly white school. There was differences. I had never had a white teacher before, right? And I would tell you, Miss Elizabeth at East Dover Elementary was a really nice young lady, recently graduated from college, uh, teaching, loving her job. And of course I didn't think like this then, but as I grew older and understood a lot of things more and differently, I look back and was like, you know what, that was just a young person trying to pursue her dream.
I think before I want to bring up, since Ray did bring up the whole friendship part of it, not just from a dating aspect, and then the rest of you follow suit. Um, Most of what I'm going to say is going to be revolving around relationships, not friendships. But since we are on the topic of interracial friendships, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the first white friend I ever had in my life was William B. Holmes. Never forget him. He used to always tell people, I'm from LA with his country accent. I'm from LA, Lower Alabama. He was from Bruton, Alabama, and met him when I was in basic training. And me and this dude became fast friends. I mean, fast friends. That was absolutely my guy. And basic training, tech school together. And actually, we became so close in those two environments, in basic and in tech school, that when we got our assignments, um, I got an assignment to Turkey, to Incirlik, and he got an assignment to one of the bases in England. I don't remember which one at this point, but he ended up doing a swap with someone else who had gotten an assignment to Turkey, didn't want to go, and he swapped just so he can go to Turkey with me. That's how close we had become. So we get to Turkey together, and that's just my guy. And when we both PCS, obviously PCS at the same time, he went to uh, what's the base in Pensacola? Um,
Eglin.
Dang it,
Eglin.
he went to Eglin. Yeah, and I went to Tinker in Oklahoma, and unfortunately, hurt me to my heart. But he ended up. We hadn't even been, back stateside a year yet, and he ended up getting killed in a car crash. And so I didn't bring it up to mention that part of it, but just because we were talking about the interracial friendships, and I actually didn't, I didn't grow up around white people, right? Where I grew up, it was blacks and Hispanics, and more specifically Puerto Ricans. That's what I grew up around, black people and Puerto Ricans, and so I didn't have a ton of dealings with white people growing up, really. And so here it is, I meet this dude, and we just became fast friends, and we just accepted each other. Like there was never really any discussion around race, right? It was just, here we are going through this situation together, and you cool, I'm cool, and we just became friends. And so, um, again, I still, even to this day, and that was in, man, he died in 1992, I think it was, or 93. Um, I think it was 93. So here we are 30 years later, and I still get choked up when I think about it, when I talk about him. So again, just wanted to bring him up because that was my guy, and that was the first white friend I ever had. So.
I'm gonna say I'm the opposite. I did date a couple white women in my lifetime, but most of my relationships were interracial relationships were the friendship kind. Um, I can start with when I was growing up. Our next door neighbors, the Stantons. Mrs. Stanton was this older white woman. Her Mr. Stanton, older white man. I mean, they were their grandkids called them Graham and Pap. I mean, they were country as all out get up. But they looked at me like I was their child. If I did something wrong, you talking about having a village, they were part of my village. So if I did something wrong, if my sister did something wrong, you can best believe Mr. and Mrs. Stanton were going to straighten us out. And then when my mom and dad got home, or whoever got home first, they were going to be ringing the doorbell, calling the phone, whatever, saying, "Hey, I just want to let you know what this, your son did this, and I said this to him." That woman was part of my doggone tribe.
This conversation is supposed to be about interracial relationships. All right. So I get that we can talk about the friendships, but the basis of this is about relationships. And just because you're not been in one doesn't mean you don't have an opinion about one. So let's kind of focus in on that a bit.
But yeah, I wanted to say let's chop some real lumber with it, to discuss the issues like the idea of black men when they get successful, this myth or stereotype that they go get a black woman, or I mean a white woman, I'm sorry, or the issues that why do black women date white men, or some of the concepts about you should date within your race and all that. I think those are the really heavy topics that it'll be really, um what do I want to say? Revealing to get into, just that whole idea of, and there's a lot of heavy stuff, because on one end you can say, hey, it's dangerous for black men, to think, oh, I got successful when I came up with, you use a example like, I'm gonna go with the most toxic example I can find. Go with OJ. Got Marguerite, and then he get divorced and go get him a white woman. But there's the two sides to it. Like love is love, man, and I think one of the things that we don't talk about is that it's just natural human nature when something is restricted that makes it seem more enticing because and we know, like Loving versus Virginia, that's 1967. So prior to that, it was illegal for black people, a black man to marry a white woman, a black woman to marry a white man, even though they probably got away with it more because they were running the power structure, but still, nonetheless. And you think about that, some black men, it was just like, this is the forbidden fruit. They said I couldn't have it, and now I have access to it. And, there's a lot of themes about it, and I'm not coming with a definitive thought on it. I think the farthest I've gone with interracial dating personally is I dated a fair-skinned Puerto Rican. So that's about as far as I've gone. But, I mean, you got to think about how I grew up, man. My grandmother, her parents were sharecroppers. So she used to teach me as a little boy, don't look white people directly in the eyes, So, maybe a lot of that was how I was raised. So, but there's a lot to really unpack in that. Not to just unpack it in a sense of, yeah, this is my experience and that experience. There's a lot of cultural context. There's a lot of social context. And so, that's where I would really like for us to dig into is, like I kind of opened up with the invention of race, the prohibition of the intermingling, the social shunning of this type of relationship or that type of relationship, the question of, are you really black if you're dating someone? Well, all of these weird ideas that are around the topic of interracial relationships. I think that's really an important place for us to go with this.
And I agree. And I like the fact that you brought up how you were raised, right? And I think that plays a huge role. Obviously everyone's raised different, right? We may the four of us have there's a lot of commonalities amongst us, right? And five if you count B. But still at the same time, we have our differences, right? We were all raised different. Rod and I had very similar upbringings as far as our environment, but we still have our differences. We view things differently. We're from a bit of a different generation, and so we all have our own experiences. We were all raised differently. And so one of my issues with it is when Black people, because that's usually the conversations that I'm having about race with or interracial dating, when they act like their view on a particular or their view on interracial dating is the view, right? Like that is the one right view because that's the way they see it. And I'm like, listen, you and I weren't raised the same. And so even if you want to talk about the psychology of it, because a lot of times they get into that, like, well, there's the psychology behind it that if you're dating someone white, then there's you have this going on and you have that going on. Well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that there's psychology behind every single thing we do. Every single thing we do and say, there's some sort of psychology around it or behind it. But it's not the same psychology for every single person that's dating outside of their race. It just isn't, right? And so I think one of the things that I've said to people is that pro-black also means letting black people exist in ways that differ from your view of blackness, right? So your one view does not make it the right view. It's just your view. We all see it differently. And I think about something that and I'm going to make this point, and then Rod, I'll give it back to you because I'll end up talking for days about it. But I think about something I was reading from Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he was responding to, because Jill Scott is notoriously against interracial dating. She has a problem with black men who date outside of the race. And he wrote an op-ed. It's been some years back now, where he talked about the fact that he thinks part of the issue for Jill Scott and for a lot of black women in general, I'm not going to say all, obviously, is the fact that in black people, let's just say a lot of black people in general, we kind of view marriage in this from a collectivist approach, right? Like, like this affects you marrying this one person affects the entire race, right? You cannot attach a collectivist approach to something that is as individual and as private as marriage, right? And then the other thing about that is, the other reason why a collectivist approach doesn't work is because when I go to bed at night, I don't go to bed with black people, right? Black people don't pay half of my bills. Black people didn't raise my daughter, right? Black people don't travel with me, right? There's an individual who does all of those things, right? And that individual that I've chosen, that has chosen me, is based upon these qualities, right? Of like compassion, of commitment, of vision, of whatever else we see in each other. And those qualities are not inherently black, they're not inherently white. They are just qualities, right? And so, again, it's a very private and intimate thing, marriage and relationships. It is not a collectivist thing where Kevin, as a person, I did something to the entire black race because I did not marry a black woman. And to suggest that is ridiculous.
No, that's a great point. And it really gets back, to people being allowed to love who they love, and I think that there are probably dozens of reasons why people within the black community, particularly black women, may feel the way they do about black men marrying outside their race. And especially if they consider you to be a good black man, right? And I know we've heard that.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter, right? Because people typically gravitate towards those who have shared values and shared goals
Absolutely.
as them,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Black, blue, brown, purple, orange, it doesn't matter, because most people feel like if they want a chance at being happy in a relationship, they need to be with someone who they can relate to. That doesn't mean the same as, right? Because people who are vastly different can come together in a union and decide, I respect you as a person. I don't care what you look like. I don't care what your race is. If your race is different than mine, then I'm willing to learn about what made you into being who you are, which engenders then more respect for it. And that's really what it is. You have a bunch of Black folk married to black folks, white folk married to white folk, that don't respect the individual.
Right.
So what about that, right? You could probably survey a lot of people married to someone of the same race who are very unhappy and ask them, would you marry someone outside your race if you believed it would make you happier? And I guarantee you, 90% of them would say yes, because that's what they want to be. They want to be happy.
Absolutely.
So I believe that this whole idea. So for everyone that has an opinion about it, they probably have never sat down and had that conversation to express that opinion or share their thoughts on why they believe that you shouldn't date outside your race. But like you said earlier, it's because somehow they've become an authority on your blackness or what's going to make you happy or what's best for you.
Right.
When in all actuality, just as we've probably learned along the way that maybe if you practice the law of reciprocity, you might have a greater chance for being happy, no matter who it's with. But we don't think about that. And, and I personally, I think it's because a lot of people are just selfish, quite honestly. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with loving who you love. And, and people that have a problem with that, then they have a problem. They don't even know you on that level, on a personal level. They don't know who you're married to on a personal level. If you're married to someone, that's not of the same race, they don't know them. They don't know what they do for you, right? Because that's really all it's about. Once you get married, it's about how do they make you feel? How are y'all connected? What dreams and aspirations are y'all pursuing together along this journey called life? And for me, I'm like, if you're happy, then I'm happy for you. That's my motto. I don't, if Brother John was to say, you know what, hey, I'm marrying this lady and she's from Switzerland and I'm the first Black person that she's ever spoken to, but she's my girl. We connected. And I'm like, dude, my brother is happy. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
She gets treated just like family off the rip, and that's what
Absolutely.
it should be. But I don't think we have enough conversations because a lot of times the conversations surrounding relationships, interracial relationships, they're centered around people's personal feelings based on their own experiences, thoughts, what they've been taught, not what they've grown to believe, through dealing with their own trauma, dealing with, getting over, the stereotypes that were taught to them as a young person, making sure that they're exposed to enough people in different races so they can say, hey, all that stuff I was taught, not necessarily so. It doesn't mean that you don't still have preferences. Everyone probably has preferences, but you never know where this journey of life is going to lead you. Who's going to cross your path, and be like, wow, I never considered dating outside my race, but this feels right. Let me explore this, only to find out this is the sweetest, kindest, most thoughtful person. You feel the most connected that you've ever felt. And, you know, and not to ramble on, but to me, I think that people come from a place of selfishness when they spew their opinions about who someone else is dating or married to.
I'll jump in again real quick. Yeah, that was definitely good stuff, Rod. To piggyback off what you said, it's the prejudices from within the person that seems to have the problem. You know, again, when Kevin told me about his wife, you know, when they started dating, I didn't care if she was green, purple, orange. I mean, my brother was happy. That's what made my heart sing, is because my brother was happy. You know, Roger, absolutely right. It's okay for you to have a preference. You know, everybody has preferences. You know, but we also, in my opinion, a lot of us have those prejudices that are within, and a lot of them are taught. You know, my mom is originally from Southern Alabama. You know, she grew up in a time where, you know, she had to call every white person sir, ma'am, whatever it was, miss this, Mr. that. You know, my mom was a teenager. You know, and so she is literally 2 steps away from slavery. My great grandfather was born into slavery. You know, so she was literally 2 steps away from that. So she, of course, some of the things that she experienced were a whole lot different than what I experienced being from Northeast Ohio, being in a mixed community of Black and white people. You know, so again, what we have to do, in my opinion, is we have to get past those doggone the social norms. You know, because Black is supposed to be with Black, white is supposed to be with white. No, we're all human. This is the human race. We all bleed red when we are cut. And God didn't tell us just love one race. He said love one another. And that's what I think people really need to get away from. Again, get away from those socio norms that they learned that were negative, and start looking at, like you said, look at the heart of the person that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and then we'll get to, or not we'll get to, because we hear, you know, you just think about just how the myth making out of it. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Black women personally, but I don't have to down any other race because of that. And, you know, like you got people, here's like one of it irks me. Oh, I date white women because Black women have attitude. No, you ain't got to dog all Black women because you got a preference. Mm-hmm. Or I date white men because Black men don't provide. No. The ones you met don't provide. You don't have enough dating experience to say what all Black men do. Okay. Right. And those, but you know, you don't have to get, I love the fact that, you know, because obviously all of us came from, you know, like we said, similar backgrounds. Ray sounded like he came from a good quality 2-parent household. His mama was an entrepreneur. But I'm from the hood, okay? I'm from the hood. And a lot of times in the hood, we come up with really foolish, crazy stuff, you know? So it became what being Black is, right? You know, so like if you talked heavy air quotes, proper, that ain't Black. Or if you dress a certain way, that ain't Black. Or if you listen to a certain type of music, I am so for the freedom for Blackness to be so many things, because it shouldn't be limited. Like, you know, that, let me not get too far. We talking about relationships. Here's something that blows my mind, right? So I remember in high school, man, and this is, y'all know what I'm talking about, because this is common all throughout. This ain't just Texas. But y'all know the white girls that got the certain haircut and the certain swag, and you say, oh yeah, you know she like Black men.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like if Black dudes dated that chick, it was cool because she was so immersed into the culture that somehow made it different. But I'm like, doesn't that kill the whole argument? because you're still talking about race. And I don't care how close she is to black people or how black she act, she's still white. That don't make her black. So why is that all right when your problem is the race issue? So now you're saying, well, her personality makes her like an honorary part of one of us. But I'm like, ain't that the point in the beginning, that you match up with somebody who has a personality and a way about them, and y'all have things in common and y'all connect? Isn't that the point in the very beginning? Like, so, you know, when you start to really just poke holes in these arguments, and I think what happens is, with any situation, you usually have anywhere from 10 to 15% that are way up, that are hot. Then you got like usually 10% that are cold. And then you got that 75, 80% that's in the middle that have more of a, you know, a thought process where they can be reckoned with. You can have some decent conversation. But usually these two voices on the extremes are loud. You know, and they get more play and they get more say. So like when you get a boy, and like, man, I don't want it down Jill Scott. I wasn't aware that she said that. That's my girl. You know what I'm saying? Like, Jill Scott, if you watching this, if you watching this, DM me. I'm single. You know, you know what? Like, holler at your boy. But but a prominent voice like Jill Scott, or you know, like Dr. Umar Johnson, these prominent voices saying you shouldn't date outside of your race, they're loud and they get more play than us for having a very open, reasonable conversation about interracial dating, you know. And then you got these cold voices down here talking about only date white women, only date white men if you're a black woman or a black man, because black people ain't about this. So those voices on the polar opposites are loud. And then right here in the middle, where we're willing to have these conversations, our voices aren't amplified and loud. No, people are drawn to salaciousness. And that's why the interracial relationship is filled with so many myths. It's filled with so much talking as if who I date makes me a good or bad black. A good or bad black. like I could name off a whole bunch of black couples who ain't about the liberation of black people. Okay. You know, like I think we were having this conversation a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, what about Ben Carson? Him and his wife, they ain't about black people at all. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But that's not interracial. So like, it's just the weight that we put on it. And like y'all said, you know, like a romantic relationship is probably one of the most fundamental, powerful, and impacting relationships that we'll enter in our entire life, because this is the person that is going to spend life with you in such an intimate way. And you got to be right about that choice. And it's got to be right about your values and I say this all the time with dating, man. We quick to, people don't really know what they want because we quick to holler about what we will and won't do. But when that woo-wee hit you, it ain't nothing you could do. Mm-hmm. And that woo-wee might be black, that woo-wee might be white, but when it hit you, you got to answer the call. That's all it is. You got to answer the call.
Hey, John, it ain't just that thinking in the hood. I can tell you that right now. That happens everywhere. In the little small city town that I'm from, it's exactly the same. So I just want to make sure I jumped in there and said that.
So say, you know, when John was talking about, you know, those voices that are loud within our community, voicing their opinions, right? The thing that always escapes me is that how could any one person believe that they can speak for an entire community of people about what is right, what is wrong, what's good for them, what's best for them? The fact of the matter is they can't. But unfortunately, there are so many people that are looking for something to grasp a hold to without having an original thought, idea, suggestion, or opinion of their own. They're willing to jump aboard that train because it's already moving. And then more people jump aboard. And before you know it, you got a whole train full of people that are spewing the same thing. You know, And we've watched it. We've watched it play out. I know we're talking about relationships, but we watched it play out in politics even. When people won't grow and develop themselves to know what they truly want, need to live a fulfilling, successful life, yeah, they'll grasp anything. But this whole idea of relationships, I go back to everyone has an opinion, but we all know that, you know, once you go in that house and close that door and it's just you and your partner, you and your spouse trying to figure out, you know, life's challenges or how you're going to build this life together, you know, how you're going to make provision for one another, how you're going to take care of one another. That's what it should be about, you know. So I will pass it back to Kev because I know he hadn't spoken for a minute, and I always like, and you know, and really because, you know, since he's living it every day, I think he provides a unique perspective, and we all know and love his wife, and we know her to have a great heart, and she makes him happy, you know.
Right.
So the rest of it, does the rest of it even matter?
Right. Right.
I mean, really, does
Right.
the rest of it
Yeah.
even matter? You know, and I think, you know, as we've grown and, you know, over the years and learned a lot about, you know, what's really important and what's not, I think we can sit here today and say, you know what, that stuff doesn't matter. That's just a lot of background noise. And you know what? If you're if you allow yourself to be distracted by it, then that's what you'll be distracted.
I think about a conversation that I had with this young lady who was one of my when I was a superintendent, um, before I retired, superintendent of the FSS, which is a personnel office for anyone who's not military who might be listening. But before I retired as a chief, I was superintendent, and she happened to be, um, and she was a senior airman. She was an airman in my squadron. And so when I retired, I guess she didn't. They everyone knew that they could talk to me about anything, right? I mean, but I guess she felt like that was maybe something I was a little too contentious to talk about when I was still in uniform. So when I retired, we had some because I didn't accept. This is back when I was actually even on Facebook, and I would often get Facebook friend requests um, from troops at the base, and I didn't accept them. And I would tell them, "Nah, I can't. No, I don't roll like that." You know what I mean? Like I'm not accepting friend requests from you. Once I retire,
Yeah,
that's
y'all
all
gonna be
good.
out here doing this
And so that's
foolishness,
what I
and I'm gonna
did.
have to check it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not. Nope. I'm not putting myself in any sort of crazy situations or yeah. So, but once I retired, I did. I did that. I retired and I accepted friend requests from a lot of my old troops and stuff. And she ended up sending me this DM, and she's like, "Can we have this conversation about?" Because she knew I was dating. Um, my at the time, Felicia was my girlfriend, but she was like, "I just, I had some questions about some things," and so she was young too. And so she gets into this thing where she's like, "Well, I think to me it seems like the only black men who date white women are black men who, have either been hurt by a black woman or just don't like black women in general." And I'm like, well, first off, you're talking about your experiences. You're like 23 years old. Okay. So, I mean, your experiences are pretty limited, quite frankly. But then on top of it, I don't fit either of those. I've not been hurt by anyone. I love black women. Absolutely love black women, right? Always have, always will. Um, and the fact that I'm dating, or at the time was dating someone white, doesn't change that. And again, like I said before, Felicia, anyone I'd ever actually dated was black. And nothing about me changed in going from that to dating Felicia. I was still the same person. And she says, well, to me, I just think that black men who date white women, and I stopped her and I said, well, that's one of the places where you have it wrong too. For me personally, I'm not a black man who dates white women, right? I'm a person who has his own unique experiences, which happen to involve meeting and falling in love with a white woman, right? So that whole the way you just you know put that contextually is just wrong. It's just is off base. Um, but I will also say this, and I told her, I said, to a great degree, I understand why some women, some black women, feel the way that they do because in their experiences, and it goes back to what you said, John, these black men who feel the need to, stereotype black women. Well, black women are this, and black women are that. So that's why I don't date black women. And that sort of thing pisses me off, quite frankly, because why are you stereotyping, any one group of people, right? You don't know, you haven't met all black women. You haven't even you've met what, less than 1% of the black women in this world, right? In this country. And so for you to stereotype that way is just ridiculous, right? And so to that extent, I get it. I get the black women who feel that way about those kinds of black men, but not all black men who have dated or who are married to someone non-black feel that way, right? Some of us, just as Rod stated, right, we just met someone who was right for us, right? We just connected. Everything about that person just fits for you, right? And that's what Felicia was and is to me, right? Just so happens that in my now almost 53 years of living, I've never been in a relationship as good as this. I just haven't. That's not because she's white. It has nothing to do with her being white. It's because of the person that she is, not because of the race of her skin. Right? Had I met someone who internally was Felicia, with everything that Felicia is, right? Had I met Felicia as she is, and she'd been black, had she been Asian, had she been whatever, it would not have mattered to me, right? It had nothing to do with her race. It had to do with her as a person, period. End of story, right? I don't walk around saying, hey, look at me. I'm married to this white girl. You know what I mean? No, that's not what it's about for me. It's not about trying to, you know, uh, do any sort of harm to black women. That's not what it's about, right? It's about me being happy, as all of you have stated, right? Felicia makes me happy, and again, that's not because of the color of her skin. It's because of the person that she is. Period. Um,
And quite honestly, that's the only point. You
yeah,
know,
right.
that's it. But so for those that might be watching, struggling, wondering, uh, I say at the end of the day, you still have to decide what works for you, right? Not looking to your left and your right, not listening to the noise of the people that, you admire and respect because, you were born into their family. They don't know what's making you happy or not,
Right.
So I think a lot of the times, we sacrifice what's best for us trying to please people who we don't live with, who don't help us pay our bills, who's not going to fulfill us at all, just because they have an opinion. We've got to get beyond that. And that would be my recommendation to anybody. Understand, what works for you. And when you figure out who does it for you, then that's who you be with. And if it just so happens that person is the same race as you, great. If they're not, great. Notwithstanding that, you know, in my years of coaching, you know, we've had the pleasure of coaching kids that, you know, that were born out of a, you know, interracial relationship. Great kids, great parents. Their parents just happen to be of different races. However, as cruel as adults can be, kids can be as well. You know, so think about
Absolutely.
what Black folk going into an integrated environment where they had always been segregated have to deal with. You know, can I touch your hair? Does it feel like
Yeah.
wool? You know, now why is your hair so curly? Uh yeah, you know, how do you feel about this? How do you feel? I mean, they're still humans, you know. But if you don't have real conversations about it amongst yourselves as adult and with your kids, then they'll grow up, you know, being persuaded or dissuaded by people that really doesn't mean anything to them, people that don't even know them. Yeah. Uh so I appreciate you sharing that, brother Kev.
Real quick,
Again,
and then when I tell you this is a quick story, it's a real quick story. I had someone, and this has been some years ago now, who it was so funny because they said to me, "Well, what do you think? You know, like Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass would think of you being with someone who's white?" I said, "Well, considering Frederick Douglass' second wife was white, I think he'd be okay with it." And she was like, "Oh." Oh, you didn't know that, huh? You didn't know that? No, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't want to say pushback, but I think that this is an important conversation to have. And I think, whenever we come over and deal with these topics, it's good because there are people that don't have the width and breadth of experience that we have and to have those conversations. So I think this is an important conversation to have. And I do think that we do need to make room in our hearts for the fact that, look at this. I'm going to come up blurry on the screen because my internet is tripping. Maybe I'll be able to edit that out a little bit. But, I think that it's worth it to understand the social construct. We understand that the actual scientific basis of race is BS. We know that it's been scientifically proven. It's invalid, but we do understand the power of the social construct. We do understand oppression, marginalization, and for purposes of understanding and rocking with your marginalized group and the oppression that you've experienced. And my entire life, I've been a strong advocate of Black pride and Black is beautiful and all that. So I think this is an important conversation to have because sometimes it's not just about, oh, my parents told me not this, that, and the other, but sometimes it's I've experienced things and I view people through this lens because I've had bad experiences and some truly horrific experiences, So, and that's on both sides of the aisle, you see those guys on, man, I hate to say this, man, because people watching probably are big fans of Fox News. Maybe one of y'all brothers are big fans of Fox News. I don't know, but you'll see you will see those guys, man, and they'll be like, Black people, this, that, and the other, and I'll be like, oh yeah, he got hurt, and he grew up and Black girls rejected him, Black dudes made fun of him, and now he think all Black people are this way, and he did that. So I think it's an important conversation to have because there's so many more elements than just people just making uninformed choices about what they like. There's always a level of trauma. There's a lot of the stuff that's in the structure of this country. Like, you always have to judge or understand, because like when we get caught up in the racism, which obviously racism is the systemic part, when you have the ability to keep people from the resources that they need to survive and thrive. And what we do on an interpersonal level is probably better defined as prejudice. Because, you know, I can't be racist because I can't keep nobody from feeding their family or going to school or anything. But when you talk about those issues and everything, sometimes it's a matter of what people have personally experienced and what we've been socialized to believe, and not to believe that some of these off the wall thoughts haven't affected us all, because we grew up celebrating Columbus Day and then had to do further investigation to figure out that he ain't never touched foot in the United States, and, you know, all these other things. And so there is this imagery and this message of what the United States really is, and what, you know, Europe really was, and, you know, the white man's burden and all of these things. And so we do have to understand that it's not just white people that believe some of these outlandish things. They were socialized. They came through an education system that taught them that and they truly believe it because every reputable source that they believe in their life told them it was this way and that way. And so I think this conversation is important to have, because it's not just as simple as I'm out in the dating game and I got these weird preferences. My life has been shaped by things. And so an opinion on interracial relationship that goes outside of just the normal bonding of human beings being attracted to each other because of these core similarities that make you want to spend significant time of your life with is one thing. And that's a beautiful thing. And we should open it up. But we should also make space for people to say, I don't date this race or that race for this reason. Not to accept it, but to allow them to tell their story. Because, you know, God bless him, man. Our chief of staff, General Brown, you know, he got up telling the story. Yeah, I've been treated bad by black people. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, really, man, you ain't got to say that. Like, you know, all of us interpersonally get treated bad by people within your vicinity. Right. But, you know, I guarantee you it ain't never been black people trying to keep you from going to a school because you was black. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like we've got to be responsible with that. And so when having a conversation about interracial relationship, I was excited to get into this topic because I think us especially, there's a level of responsibility in approaching this topic and approaching it. And I think that we had a unique perspective to bring. And so I'm very pleased that we were able to have a very civil, very strong, and I really believe there's a lot of other places that we could have gone, but I'm very pleased that we were able to have this conversation.
And about the constructs, man, you know, people don't get is that race is the child of racism, not the father. You know what I mean? Racism is what created race, not the other way around. So
yeah, all I'm gonna say is what I would implore folks. Remember 3 words: love is blind. You know, a lot of people have blinders on, you know, and I know a lot of people that are sitting out there talking about they can't find Mr. or Miss Right. You know, well, maybe you're not looking in the right places. Maybe you're shunning someone else because of their race is different than yours. And because of that, because of those blinders and or the ignorance that goes along with it, you're missing the person that is actually supposed to be for you. So all I want to say is love is blind. And, you know, if we're going to love one another, then let's truly love one another. And
but between now and our next episode, if
yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to let it be. I'm trying to let it be. I will add this to what Ray said. The intention of love is not color or race, but love sees very well. And I think it's important for love because true love is to be able to see me for everything I am and not be blind to any aspect of me. But I totally agree with what you were saying.
and I get your point, bro. I get your point.
Yeah. You're talking about that whole when people say, you know, I don't see race. which is crap,
I
right?
don't see color.
And that's not the goal. The goal isn't to
When
not
people
see race.
say
Of
that,
course
I
you
say
see
it's
race,
obvious
you
because your
know.
belt and your shoes don't match. So I can tell.
Right. Yeah, like Trevor Noah said, of course you see color, right? Of course you see color, because when you're sitting at a light and the light changes green, don't you go? Right? So you saw that it changed green. Of course you see color. You know what I mean? And the goal is not to be colorblind. It's to respect and appreciate everything that other colors, other races bring to the table. Yeah, it's not colorblind. That's a ridiculous thought and concept, and I hate when people say that. You're right. Not that that was what Ray said, but I also get where I get it. I get all of that too. And you're right, John. You're absolutely right about that. No question. And I would challenge too everyone to and I think I've said this on here before, but it's such a big thing to me, is to challenge your belief systems, right? We all grow up with other people's belief systems, right? Because until we have our own experiences, when we grow up in this world, everything that we grow up believing comes from our environment. It comes from our parents, our grandparents, our friends, family, all those sorts of things, right? And so, unfortunately, we just believe those things as kids, not knowing that a lot of it is BS. You know what I mean? So once you get at some point in your life, you have to challenge every single belief that you have, right? And question whether or not it's actually yours. Is this based upon my own experiences, or is this based upon just some stuff that I grew up with? And I understand that cognitive dissonance can set in because, for you to challenge something, a belief system that came from, say, a parent that you may have the utmost respect for. Well, now you don't want to challenge it because if they're wrong, what else about that person or what else about what they taught you was wrong? But you have to be willing to challenge all of your belief systems. Um, you just can't. Otherwise, I mean, come on. It makes no sense to me when people don't do that. You have to challenge every single one of them, not just some of them, but all of them. And also, I would say between now and our next episode, I would encourage you all to reach out to us and provide your thoughts on what you think about interracial relationships. And we can kind of briefly mention some of those thoughts that you provide to us before we jump into whatever the next topic would be for our next episode. So, any other closing remarks, fellas? All right. Well, with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. As we wrap up this week's episode, I want to leave you with an anonymous quote that says, I believe that two people are connected at the heart, and it doesn't matter what you do or who you are or where you live. There are no boundaries or barriers if two people are meant to be together. Till next time, peace.